First of all, I have to do this because the most important thing about today's update is being able to check out how many Vestige points you have until the drop. Basically, the Desert Treasure 2 rings had 3 invisible drops, and once you hit the third one, you get the Vestige. Today's update can visually show you if you're at 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3 Vestige drops, and first one is Leviathan. I just realized I forgot my Shadow Barrage, and okay, there we go. That is a great start to the video. Okay, attempt number 2. Oh no, that sucks. Okay, I guess I'm 0 out of 3 now. Basically, you get a single gold ring if you have 1 out of 3, and you get 2 gold rings if you're 2 out of 3. Since I got none, that means I'm still 0 out of 3 drops. Okay, Whisperer next, and we get... Oh, come on. Oh, okay, to be honest, I do only have 100 KC, but I'm 0 out of 3 for both bosses right now. That kind of sucks. Honestly, I'm not expecting anything for Vartorvis. I haven't done this boss at all on this account. Oh, yep, of course. Like, it's 0 out of 3 again. Okay, lovely. Okay, so not only did Jagex reveal the Vestige drops, but also they made few changes for Duke Sakela specifically that makes this boss better now. One of them is that you can now stack up mushrooms to do multiple kills at the same time without always needing to come back here. So in this scenario, I got 48 mushrooms on one side, and I'm gonna go do the same on the other side. Now I'll mine 48 crystals, and none of these supplies disappear after my first Duke Sakela's KC, so I can do 4 kills in row without needing to get more supplies. They did adjust Duke a little bit for this, giving him more hit points to make up for it, but this is a much needed change. Oh god, no, man, this is just sad. Okay, I am 0 out of 3 on all 4 bosses. But yeah, I can now just make a new potion and go again without needing to get the mushrooms upstairs. Saves a lot of time in the long run. Well, it looks like someone is close to their Vestige. We're gonna see a lot of gold rings in grand exchange in the upcoming days. I have a big announcement to make, and that is me partnering up with Creator Crafted. They are officially licensed by Jagex and offer a multitude of different items like desk mats, LED signs, plushes, statues, metal posters, air fresheners, and much more within the classic old school RuneScape style. Currently, they have a lovely summer sale going on with certain products like the Leviathan desk mat and a brand new take on the air fresheners with all your favorite Slayer musters and trees. On top of that, they also done limited restock on all their most popular items. So if you waited a long time to get something for yourself or your loved ones, this is a great opportunity to purchase some quality RuneScape merchandise. Head over to the link in the description and use my code KriibusFC to get 10% off on your next pickup. Okay, we're done with Desert Treasure bosses. Let's move on to something more simple. BRYO and OBOR got some new updates as well. One of them is that you don't need a key to fight the bosses anymore, and I'll show you why. So I'll enter the room and it doesn't take a key away from me. That's the first thing. The other thing is the boss doesn't have a drop table anymore. It's just gonna drop this giant bone that gives you 150 prayer experience. The reason is that you now need to open up this chest to get the BRYO loot. So you can keep fighting BRYO forever in this room and it'll keep respawning, but if you want to get the actual loot, you need to open up the chest itself. And this works similar for OBOR as well. The boss itself has regular hill giant loot table, but if we go to the chest, that's where the actual loot is. And I can stay in this OBOR room indefinitely if I want to. And I think the bosses themselves also have an increased drop rate on the keys, so this is probably the fastest way to obtain the unique items here. This allows players to do their entire Slayer task at these bosses if they get the Hill Giants or Moss Giant tasks, and also allows players to complete all combat achievements without needing to grind thousands of small mobs beforehand. Okay, let's jump to the next boss. We got a brand new item called the Steel Ring, and it gives quite heavy defensive melee stats for mid-game players. The drop comes from deranged archaeologists that you can find in the Fossil Island swamp. The fight itself is quite easy. You protect from range, and when the boss says learn to read, it's gonna throw magic books at you that you have to dodge. That's it, that's the entire fight. The boss also has a lot of common loot that is perfect for mid-game players like Runite Limbs, Cannonballs, and Alkabos. Overall, this boss was hunted by absolutely nobody beforehand. So adding this small drop like Steel Ring to the boss table makes it much more appealing for mid-game players. I did end up getting a ring myself on 20 KC, which was actually I think quite lucky. I immediately tried to sell it to see if I can make some nice money on day 1, and I ended up selling for roughly 750k. I think its intended purpose is to give you more defensive stats in minigames like Perilous Moons, where melee defense is extremely important to have, especially if you don't have full Barrows armor to protect you from the bosses themselves. There are tons of bosses these days whose main attacks are melee style, so this might just become the must-have ring for any early to mid-game accounts until you get yourself the Dagoner Kings to get the upgraded version. I did try to equip it, but I think it's currently bugged on day 1. It's supposed to show you plus 24 crush defensive bonus, but it only showcased plus 2. So if they're gonna fix that, I highly recommend people to get this if you're an early or mid-game player. But this wasn't the only ring that entered the game. Well, I guess this one is already in the game, but it got a nice buff. The Granite Ring imbued version now has plus 24 range defensive bonus, and that's another good alternative option for mid-game players. The reason I imbued this ring is because it goes really well with the next thing I want to show you, and that is being able to melee ARMADYL God Wars boss now, especially with Noxious Halberd. With today's update, you can actually melee Kriya Ra, not just with the Salamander, but with every Halberd in the game. This also works on Aviances to get a kill count before you enter the boss room. And I will say, it felt quite weird being able to hit Kriya Ra with Noxious Halberd, but it does hit quite well. My max hit was over 60 with Oathblade armor. I don't think this will change any metas. I think Chinning and Tumekan Shadow are still best options for this boss, but this is definitely an alternative option to your normal methods. Kriya Ra does have plus 80 melee defensive bonus, and I don't think there's any feasible way to lower it. That's why Chinning method will always be better, because it's just a lot more DPS since you're hitting the minions and not the boss itself. But I'm sure somebody will figure out a method to do this more efficiently with the Noxious Halberd. And there's also a new spell in the normal spellbook called Monster Inspect. This basically tells all about the stats of your enemies, what they're weak to, what style they use, and much more. It's a level 42 spell, and it's meant to incentivize new players to look up elemental and monster weaknesses that came with today's update. Jagex added in a lot of new information, and it's just too much to take in all at once, so this spell will make it easier to digest. So if you want an easy access to know what type of weapon every monster is weak to, you can use this level 42 spell. Okay, next boss is HUEYCOATL, who got some small changes as well. First of all, the tail phase now has 300 hit points instead of 400, so it's faster to take down. Secondly, they made the shockwave on the ground easier to dodge and more predictable, so it's not just random. And finally, Jagex buffed this boss drop rate again. You now have a 1 in 18 chance to get a unique drop. On top of that, the HUEYCOATL high drop rate is increased to 1 in 30, and it drops 3 height always, no matter what. So you technically need to kill only 60 Hueys for the full D height set. And they made the Dragon Hunter 1 go from 1 in 207 to 1 in 69 drop rate. So that is firstly nice, and also insane increases all around. And on the topic of Dragon Hunter 1, it received some insane buffs as well. 40% magic damage and 75% magic accuracy against draconic creatures. This also stacks with the current elemental weakness changes as well. I went to test it out at Rune Dragons, and my max hit was close to 60, but honestly it still feels quite weak, I would say. Considering it's a Dragonbane weapon and realistically only works at few places, it still feels more weak than the Dragon Hunter lance and crossbow. But it's also much easier to obtain and meant for mid-game players, so that does make up for it. The problem is, most players will always go for the Twin Flame Staff during mid-game, and that makes this item a little bit obsolete, because the Twin Flame Staff does exactly what this weapon is supposed to do, but you get the Twin Flame Staff much earlier, and it's also much more versatile. I will say it's really good at the Huey boss itself. I can constantly hit 60s, and it's a nice budget option to have. Now, one very odd thing they added with this update is that you can now automatically cast from the ancient spellbook. It doesn't make much sense, because the only time you would use this weapon is when attacking dragons, and all dragons are weak to earth spells, meaning you need to be on standard spellbook always. So having ancient magics to be autocasted doesn't really mean anything for this wand. You need to be able to cast the big earth spells to deal more damage. But since we're already on the topic of weaknesses, there is a lot of changes. There's about 250 new new monsters that got their elemental weakness, which makes weapons like Twin Flame Staff a must-have today, since it has a very strong passive effect for standard spells. I'm not gonna go through all of them, but I will add a link in the description if you want to see every monster, what they're weak to, how much weakness they got, and how this affects magic in general. I will say Jagex added a new feature called Flat Armor. We already kinda have it in the game, but this now makes it official. What it means is that let's say an NPC has +2 flat armor. That means they will take 2 less damage than what your hit is going to be. So if you're gonna hit 50, now you hit 48. Negative flat armor means the opposite. So if someone has -4 flat armor, that means you get a +4 on your every successful hit. That means enemies with positive flat armor might encourage slower hitting weapons that have a bigger hit, while enemies with negative flat armor encourage fast hitting weapons with multiple hit splats like the dual HUEYCOATLs. It's meant to be a small balancing thing to help out Jagex in case a boss is too weak or too strong, and it adds another layer of tactics whenever you go hunt down future bosses. Look, I will say, there is so much more than this. I just covered the most basic things, but in reality this update is so massive that it's impossible to put it all into one video. Like for example, the Dooms of Amaska changes themselves require an entire video on its own, and I will make a guide on this in few days along with every other change on this update, so make sure you subscribe to not miss out on those videos. But I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow with another one. Bye!